Okay, so these are unprecedented times. We're here having a webinar just to kind of come together. My name is Uri Schneider. Many of you know me, many of you are known to me, and whether that's true or not, I really extend my deepest care and empathy to each and every person, whatever situation you find yourself in. And we cannot assume the circumstances of our neighbors and of our friends and loved ones. So I hope and pray that everyone is in the best of circumstances. And I recognize that some of us may be dealing with some very challenging things, physical safety, health of loved ones, other things that are extremely challenging in these times. So my thoughts and prayers are with everybody. My hope was that by pulling us together, somehow something good could come out of that, just being together, and offering a couple thoughts that, thanks Danny for the comment in the chat. My hope and my thought is that as we come together, we can come out stronger, right? So by strength in numbers, all of us are smarter than any one of us. All of us are stronger than any one of us. And showing up and just leaning into this situation and showing up and making sure that social distancing doesn't become social isolation can be a very, very important starting point. So first and foremost, I got feedback from at least one colleague from the first email that we sent out, suggesting that we didn't emphasize the rules and safety and best precautions. So I think starting off, everyone should obviously follow the best advice of the CDC and the World Health Organization, and follow whatever regulations are in place wherever you live. I think that at the time that I wrote the first email, a lot of those things were not yet being suggested and enforced, and I was actually suggesting more aggressive conduct for yourselves and for your loved ones. That was my intention. The email eventually went out after much more restrictive things had been in place, but everyone should definitely employ best practices in terms of hygiene and self-care and distance from people outside your household. And if you know that you're sick or not well, you shouldn't put yourself near anybody else. So first and foremost, those are kind of the unpleasant don'ts. So we can kind of think things as, I think there's ample exposure in the media to what we shouldn't be doing. I think that what we're all trying to figure out is what we should be doing, because in these unprecedented times, we don't know what we can do. So several more people just popped in. I was just saying to frame things as you should do and not do, and refrain from things that you shouldn't be doing for sure. But I think the question that I'd like to address and to discuss among us is, we all have to keep living in a very different type of environment, a very different type of mindset, with access and limited access and changes to all kinds of things. How do we keep staying human? How do we keep staying connected to ourselves, to each other, even in this age of this virus that has put us, all in the same disrupted position? So everyone is muted right now. I'm going to share a couple words for a bit, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And I appreciate everybody taking the time and interest to be here. So first of all, like I said, all the don'ts are very important, but if we just do all the don'ts, if we just obsess over our own physical safety, which we need to do obviously as a prerequisite, if we only do that, we will all end up feeling very isolated, feeling very empty, and feeling very low. I think it's very important that we all find ways wherever we are to pick ourselves up, to keep some semblance of normalcy, to keep certain habits in place. And a lot of the systems and things that we leaned on are no longer available to us. So how do we do that? So I wanted to frame a couple thoughts. First of all, as I shared before we started the recording, I shared the idea that we need to think about how do we keep our head and our mind occupied. And that can be through distractions. It can be through reading a good book, turning off your phone, turning off the computer, staying away from the news. It's absolute information overload. And before this whole era, we needed, the most important skill that we need in 2020 is the ability to filter the information that's constantly coming at us. And that's only more so as we live through these days and these times, which are challenging days and challenging times for all of us. be tuned in, whether it's through radio, whether it's through the internet or whatever, but also take times where you turn off all the incoming stimuli and just take something to kind of stimulate your mind, whether it's to play a game online. It could be a game of chess online with somebody. It could be reading something stimulating and challenging. It could be listening to TED Talks on YouTube. There's all kinds of areas where we could dive in and take this time to go deeper in something that interests us, but specifically avoid just binging endlessly on the news, because it's not going to do anybody well. It'll be there in another hour. You can check it then. So I think we need to take care of our cognitive state. Another state that needs to be thought about is our emotional state. Another thought is our spiritual state, whether that's faith-based or other. You know, we all have a spirit inside of us. How do we nurture that spirit in these difficult times? And I see some comments coming in. Feel free to add comments. I will reflect on those and share those. Some people are sending some private comments, which are very helpful. Thank you. So cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, what are some things that we can do? And then I think another whole area that I'll touch on is, for some of us, there's also financially. What can we do for ourselves? There are several people here that are my dear colleagues who spend their time meeting with people face to face and are dealing with the question of how are they going to continue to help the people that they care about professionally? How are they going to continue to get paid? They're teachers and speech therapists and tutors and psychologists. What do we do during these times? And then another angle on this whole thing is for those of us that run a home with another person, with a partner, with children. How do we kind of help each other within our own household, within our own unit, to kind of care for each other and give each other what we need, and most importantly, the kids. If we have kids in our lives, whether they're in our household and in our physical environment or they're not, how do we help them through this time and kind of find a way to do that? So cognitively, I think the first thing, and it overloads, it flows over into the emotional. I'm going to be putting together a list. We're going to have a website page. It's not up yet, but it'll be up later today, schneiderspeech.com/COVID19. And we're going to put a whole host of resources there of personally selected things that my father and I feel are useful pieces of data and information. I think there's a tremendous amount of cognitive load processing so many ideas and so much information. We need to filter the information. We need to listen only to the people that really know something about what they're talking about. So from a cognitive point of view, filtering the news and data, we're going to have something on that website, schneiderspeech.com/COVID19. It'll be a filtered, there'll be tons of resources there, but one of them will be data and info. It's going to be a spreadsheet that's going to continually populate itself with good, filtered articles of good news, of good sources, and so on. There's a wonderful article from the Washington Post that has some amazing modeling of what it looks like and how disease spreads and how this virus spreads and what's the impact, the positive impact that we're all doing by staying home and staying away from others who might be vulnerable, or, considering as if we're all sick, what would we want to do to kind of spare others potentially picking up this virus? So there's going to be tons of articles there that you'll be able to access at any time. And that's in terms of the cognitive load. Read good news, only good news, and stay away from kind of binging on too much news, even the good stuff. Find time to turn things off, read a book, sign up for an online class. There's all kinds of online learning like Masterclass or Udemy or Thinkific. There are all kinds of courses. This could be a great time to learn about photo editing. Take your photography collection of pictures that you have on your phone or your computer and make an album for grandma. I know I'm thinking about that with my kids, and I know my mom is on the call thinking that that's a nice idea. This is a time to dive into some optional learning and some things that you might not have had time for, in a way to kind of stimulate yourself cognitively in positive ways and enriching ways to kind of go further. So that's on the cognitive side. On the emotional side, I think social distancing poses a great risk. For those of us in the room who have communication challenges, I saw a joke that when the news came out that everyone should practice social distancing, most of the world said, yikes. People who have communication impairments said, I've been preparing for this my whole life, staying away from big crowds, not getting too close to people. The irony is humorous, but the risk is real. As much as people crave connection, and it's kind of like the lifeline of what we're all needing to be alive, is to be connected to others, to be connected to ourselves, to be connected to a sense of purpose. Social distancing and the days we're living through are extremely challenging times because they force us to really put walls between us. I encourage everybody to find ways to transcend those walls. Things like Zoom, things like FaceTime, things like Skype, things like Google Hangouts are so important during these times to stay connected. Reach out to someone if you feel you need some company. Don't feel like you're alone. Reach out to people that you think you have something to offer. If there's someone you know who might feel isolated, feeling like you have something to give during these times, if it's only a phone call, if not something financial, if not something physical, like a delivery or a gift card or something, just sending a message to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Hey, how you doing? Hey, feel free to reach out anytime you feel alone. Please call. I'm more available than usual. You know, these are meaningful things. These are tokens of social currency, of connection that we can exercise even during these times that we're all going through. So emotionally, I think stay socially connected, I think is so important. And I think also emotionally to regulate your capacity for news and for being in different states of being. So we all need to exercise a tremendous amount of caution and vigilance. And at the same time, all of us have different levels of tolerance of how much stress we can handle for how long. So if days on end, you know, the worry and the vigilance is too high, it might not be helpful. We need to kind of figure out our dosing of that and then kind of say, okay, I think I've done enough to secure my home. I think I've done enough to stock up for the next couple days. I think I've done enough. I'll wait for the grocery to restock before I order my next order, instead of kind of cycling through the worry and the panic. We need to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, the information coming at us is going to lead us into places that are just endless cycles of worry and panic, and emotionally it won't leave any room. So what can we do on the positive side? Make a list of gratitude every day. Find one thing you're grateful for, one person that you know that was there for you. Reach out to them. One person that you know appreciates your company, appreciates your wisdom, appreciates your voice. Send them a message. And kind of make a list of these things. In other times, I know that people found that were things that we did during the work that we did, and they found that mantra to be helpful. They would write it on a piece of paper, put it inside their lunchbox. And when they would open their lunchbox every day on the way to work, they would kind of open the lunchbox and look at all those things they had written down. And by rehearsing and reading those things, it would bring them into that kind of state, that kind of emotional place. So for ourselves, if we keep a log of gratitude, put it on the fridge, put it by our night table, put it on our phone. And even during these times, what we can realize is with everything that's changed, there are certain things that haven't. You know, we can be grateful for having a window with a view of a beautiful city. We can have a window to see a beautiful sky. We can be grateful that with all the things we worry about having enough of, none of us pay a bill for oxygen. There's an ample supply of oxygen for all of us. There's so many things that each of us can find, even in the most challenging circumstances, to be grateful for. It can be things that we have today or things that we had earlier in our life that will help us endure now. And we can appreciate that now, whether those people are among us, whether those people have left this world. We can kind of appreciate things that have been given, provided to us, even through these times. And that can help us keep our emotional states stronger. So we talked about cognitively, we talked about emotionally. I'll touch on spiritually. I'll talk a little bit about physically and financially. You know, so cognitively, emotionally, we got spiritually. For me personally, very honestly, part of my routine is waking every day and joining a group of other men to start the day praying together, starting the day learning a page of the Talmud together. That's no longer possible. Houses of worship of all faiths have closed. We all find ourselves kind of in our own homes to a greater degree or lesser degree, depending where we're living. Nonetheless, the practices that we found to nurture our spiritual life are all the more important. And if we don't feel a particular identity to a certain faith or practice, we can also relate to the idea that all of us, we have flesh, but we also have spirit. Each of us has a spirit, and the spirit is nurtured by being connected and feeling like you're part of something bigger than just making sure you have enough water and enough pasta and enough toilet paper. There's something bigger than just that, kind of filling up our little burrow with enough physical materials to kind of get through this. Spiritually, feeling connected, any community you're a part of, if it's a community of faith, if it's a local community of parents, if it's a local community of some identity, of some group that you belong to, or create one in your own building or in your own neighborhood, on Facebook or somewhere, but to feel part of something bigger than yourself. If that's connecting to a higher power, if that's connecting to some sort of fellowship, this is the time to lean into that, because it will help both the emotional but also the spiritual. And when you feel like you can receive from others and also that you can give to others, it tends to be a very healthy place spiritually and emotionally. So I encourage everybody to find those groups. And if you can't, we want to be that group for you. So feel free to lean on us. We'll try to post things, as I said, on that website, schneiderspeech.com/COVID19. We're going to develop it. It's not up yet, but hopefully by the end of today, there'll be resources there. And if you don't have another place to turn, we want to be a place for you and others to feel a part of something beyond yourself. In terms of the physical side, if there's an interest, and I'll be interested in your feedback after this webinar, tail end of this webinar, there's someone who influenced my life deeply in terms of exercises that can be done behind kids' desks at school. So Nikki is an amazing person. She herself put out a set of videos, and I would do these exercises when I was teaching pragmatic skills and speech and language pathology in a very, very special school at the Summit School in Queens. And every class that I taught, if I went into the classroom, I would have all the kids do these behind the desk activities. So essentially, all sorts of aerobic activities we can do from home without any equipment, without anything fancy. So whether it's a YouTube video that my girls have been watching, all kinds of pop dance routines that kids can learn and parents can do with kids. If it's aerobic activities like the 7-minute workout, which is something I've used in the past, even before this, but all the more so now. 7-minute workout, there are free apps. There's a website on the New York Times. 7-minute workout, it's a high intensity interval training workout where you do 30 seconds of one thing, 30 seconds of another thing, 30 seconds of another thing, and at the same time you have these 10-second breaks. There's these Tabata, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Tabata routines, also high intensity. You can download on Spotify or any streaming music service, kind of upbeat exercise music, and basically you do 20 seconds of some high interval running in place, jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, planks, whatever, and you alternate these activities. And so at home, even if you have no equipment, somehow keeping yourself physically active does amazing things. And again, it trickles into our overall emotional state. It trickles into our cognitive state. And staying active physically is so important. If you want to read more about that, I highly recommend the book Spark by John Rady. Just an amazing book about exercise and the brain, and all the more so now as we find ourselves, some of us, more limited in terms of space. But these are all things that can be done from the comfort of your own home at zero or low cost. So if there's an interest in another webinar with Nikki, I was thinking about doing that, because I really believe in physical activity being really critical pillar for us getting through things. Obviously, another physical thing is our diet and our access to the foods that we might have enjoyed before, or more of the things that we enjoy but we know aren't good for us could be altered during these times. So I think making conscious efforts to, if you didn't before, really double down on hydration, whether it's water, seltzer, whatever, but making sure you're super hydrated. There's a very simple way to know that you're well hydrated enough. It's not that grandmother tale of, 8 cups of water all the time. I'm going to borrow something from the Israeli army. They say, pipi lavan mitzuyan, pipi tzahov lo tov. For those of you that don't understand Hebrew, the translation is, they tell the soldiers to know that they're hydrated. If your urine is clear, that's good. If your urine is not, that's not good. So aside from people that have other conditions or medications that may alter the color of your urine and things like that, a general biofeedback, suggestion would be for those of us that are healthy and not taking vitamins and medications that may impact that, looking for clear urine means you're drinking enough, but drink, hydrate yourself, try to set times for meals and routines where at least one or two of the meals happen in some band of time. That can be really helpful just to make sure that we're not just binging and eating all day long. I know my kids, their principals left them messages to set them up for this time. And one of the first things they said is, don't be eating all day. That was one of the first things they told them. Don't be grazing all day long. Grazing, and depending on what we're grazing on, can have a big impact on our physical health, also our cognitive state, emotional state, and spiritual state. So it's one of those pillars. In terms of financially, just to touch on that, for those people that are struggling, and there will be many of us that are experiencing major shifts in the way we work and the way we earn, and what we're already experiencing in what undoubtedly is a temporary recession. And it's the nature of the world that things go in waves. So we're going to be going into one of those waves. Be creative. If you're on this Zoom call, you're already ahead of the curve, and people that are not yet comfortable with Zoom are going to get comfortable one way or the other. But it's amazing to me, and we've been doing this now for more than just a few years, the nature of the work, the results of the work that we can do if you're a teacher, if you're a therapist, if you're a speech therapist. I just finished a call now with a brand new teenage client who used to drive to the Riverdale office to see the one and only Dr. Phil Schneider. But prior to this situation, he no longer had the schedule availability to go to the office. So he was interested in distant, therapy from a distance. The appointment with him consisted of the following. We had a Zoom call like this face-to-face. We had simultaneously had a screen share where I could open a Google Doc that he was also privy to. And at the same time, we were collaborating and writing and journaling and doing exercises and filling in answers and questions. And the whole dialogue was incredible. And in the end, he's able to do this work in a platform that is now becoming more and more part of his everyday life. So in terms of carryover, in terms of how stiff or artificial this feels versus how much this is the way the world communicates, is changing rapidly in these days. But even before COVID-19, FaceTime and all sorts of video chat were becoming much more the norm and part of both work culture and social culture. So the idea of getting comfortable on these things is super important. And therefore, it is not, it shouldn't be thought of as second best to work through a platform like Zoom, like we are right now. It should be thought of as just another medium, and in some way has advantages. And some people even appreciate those advantages above and beyond. For me, going paperless is both good for the environment, but it also means that that shared document lives in the cloud. And at any time, that client, that student can look at that document, can update that document, can reference that document, as can I. And so those are some of the ways that we feel that this kind of platform of working can be a path for people to continue the good work that they do, and to look at it as not second best or a backup, but actually the way the world is moving. And even when we come through this, hopefully sooner than later, Zoom and this type of work is going to be, dramatically woven into what's considered the norm. It's not going to be edge, it's going to be the norm. So take this time to get more comfortable with this kind of platform. And in doing so, the boundaries of brick and mortar, physical space and distance open up. So I would just suggest that, and think about different ways to provide for the client. I think when it comes to financially, and it also comes to thinking of our neighbors and family and friends, we often think about what's good for us, what we're good at, and what we want and what we need. Start thinking about the other person. What do they need? What do they want? If it's family, if it's friends, how many times people give me a tie for Father's Day? Do I really want a tie? Maybe I want something to mount my phone in the car, something really practical and useful. Think about people in your life. Think about the people you serve. Think about your clients and your customers. What are they needing? and try to serve up what it is that they're needing, as opposed to just serving up the same thing that you thought was what you have to offer. So in terms of leaning into this time, if you're in a position where you need to rethink financially what you can offer and how you can earn, I encourage people to think about, how can I be a guide? Just give me a signal if I'm breaking up, because I got a sign that my internet was unstable. Thumbs up if you're hearing me okay. Thanks. You know I could count on you, BR. And my dad tells me I'm shaky. Okay. I'll read between the lines. So those are some points on the cognitive, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, and the financial. And I want to add another thought, which is schedules. You know, one of the things that we've started to work a lot on in our practice is executive functioning. So in addition to the work we do that a lot of people know about with fluency and stuttering, helping people express themselves with more ease, the work we do with voice, people have all kinds of strain and extra effort in their voice. In addition to that, helping people with what's now called executive functioning, which is sort of like almost as broad as the term of fluency disorders, if not broader. The idea of time management, the idea of how do you line up a goal and set up a way to move towards that goal and execute on a plan? How do you multitask and move through things? Those skills are more challenged than ever in these days. And so a couple tips I would suggest, whether you're on your own, whether you're with a partner, or whether you have a family, but I'm going to talk about it specifically from a parent point of view, because a lot of parents are suddenly thrown into homeschool mode, as my wife and I are. A big shout out to my wife. She's like amazing. Setting some sort of schedule. I learned this from a client actually many years ago. I don't think it's wise when we schedule ourselves to set up too much detail and too much, you know, spot on exactly what time, what minute programmatically we're working, but to create bands of time. So the schedule in our home might look something like this: from 8 to 10 in the morning, wake up, you know, prayer, meditation, breakfast, and exercise happens in those 2 hours roughly. From 11 to 12:30 is some sort of academic work, some sort of cognitive work if you're an adult or a teen. 12:30 to 1:30 could be lunch prep and eating. The afternoon could be filled with some leisure time. It might be time to consume news. It might be time to do correspondence and messaging. It might be time to fit in a workout. But somewhere creating these bands of time and then having these pillars, these lighthouses of mealtime or turn off screen time and just be, if you're alone or you're with others, the idea of kind of just creating these rhythms. There's all kinds of ideas and approaches with that, but you can use tools like the Pomodoro Timer is a great thing that I use for myself, where you set how long you want to work for, whether it's a 20-minute, you know, work mode, and then a 5-minute break, or you want to do a half-hour work mode and then a 20-minute break. You can adjust these things, but there's all kinds of free apps you can look for called Pomodoro Timer, and then roughly make a visual calendar if it's for kids, or just a calendar in your Google Calendar or on a piece of paper with blocks of time. So rather than scheduling every minute, create blocks of time, and in those blocks of time, you can plug in your to-do list. So if, you know, online orders of medicine, online orders of groceries, self-education, you know, so make a list of all the things you want to accomplish over these next couple of days, responsibilities that you need to do, and then things you want to fit in. Make a list of those in one column, and then create a calendar that's going to work for your biological rhythm. You can wake up a little later, go to sleep a little earlier, whichever way works for you. Some of us are early risers, some of us are late. You can finally create a schedule where it allows you to work with what you know is your natural rhythm, but that when you wake up tomorrow, you already know that the morning routine is going to be this, and then the late morning is going to be this, and then lunch is going to be here, and each of us can do that on our own. So I encourage you to look at Pinterest. You can look up visual calendars there. So I think I've given a couple suggestions in terms of how you can kind of think about scheduling and creating some structure in these very upending times. So whatever routine we might have had before is upended if we can salvage pieces of it. So if previously we always went to the gym in the morning, or previously we always had a routine of coffee and digesting the news in the morning, maybe that's what we do. The most important thing is to kind of gauge yourself and figure out what works for you. No one solution is going to work for everybody. So we encourage everybody to figure out what puts you in a good place. You know, one of the things I was talking about with this 16-year-old client who just started working with us this morning, before this call, he said, yeah, I really do badly at that. And I said to him, look, we got to tackle the way we talk to ourselves. If we had a camper, if we were the counselor and we had a camper, we would never talk to a camper and say, you're really bad at that. We would find some encouraging, nurturing way to give him permission for what he's not good at, to give him space for the things he's not yet succeeding at, and we'd figure out how to help him be successful. If we could shift our mindsets and realize we're both the camper and the counselor, we're both the parent, if it's even for ourselves, we're the parental voice in our head, and we're also the kid. All of us go between feeling strong and upbeat, hopefully, and all of us, and certainly I include myself, go into very dark places and very fearsome places in these days. We need to kind of grab our mind and our head by the reins and allow ourselves to be scared, allow ourselves to be off rhythm, allow ourselves to be struggling. And at the same time, have that voice of encouragement that can say, you know what, this habit that you have, that you're doing, the way you're doing it right now, is not good. It's not good for you. We need to do something different, and don't allow yourself to kind of go through that rhythm. So just as an example, if waking up and reading the news kind of puts you into a tizzy for the next 3 hours, try to find a way to muscle up and say, you know what, I'm not going to read the news till an hour after I wake up. I'm going to allow myself an hour to just be, and whatever is healthy and good for me, if it's exercise or making a cup of coffee and reading something good, allow yourself these spaces that don't become invaded by outsiders. I referenced before we got on the call, you know, Natan Sharansky, who was a prisoner of war, talked about being in solitary confinement and how did he stay strong. He talked about recognizing that a lot of the forces were outside of him. They were creating a very challenging situation, but in his own mind, he was the master of his own mind. He was the master of his own state. And so there are lots of things happening around us, but each of us can be the gatekeepers, and each of us can be the conductors of what we allow in our own minds. I've been debating sharing. I'll just go with it since it seems like a time to just break all the boundaries. You know, one of the most inspiring characters in history for me, if I could go back in time and have lunch with anybody, I wonder who you would want to have lunch with. I would like to meet Janusz Korczak. Janusz Korczak was a Polish secular Jewish psychologist and educator in World War II. He decided to open an orphanage. And when he was so influential in his professional life that he had a ticket out. He had a private plane to take him to Mars, where he wouldn't have to be in solitary right now. And he opted to stay with the children. He opted to stay with the children of his orphanage, and he opted to create a story. He opted to create a story, a fantasy, that they could live through a story, and he stuck with them through thick and thin. And he let go. He passed up the opportunity for his ticket to escape the horrors of World War II, and he went to the concentration camps with the children and kept their head high. And so someone like that, in my mind, is someone we need to turn to in these days. We need to create the story that's going to keep our head above water for ourselves. We need to transcend survival mode and being really base and animalistic and kind of hoarding toilet paper. We need to think about, does our neighbor have enough toilet paper? We need to think about what are the other necessities that someone down the hall might not have or someone on the block might not have. We need to think of each other. We need to get out beyond ourselves. And if we do that, we can rise up. And this challenging time, we can look back once we get through it, and it will be tough and there will be losses. I don't want to come off in any way minimizing that. But I think we can really think about today, how do we want the story to be told about how we conducted ourselves during these times? And if we do that, we have options. And that was the first thing I said at the beginning of the call. We don't choose our circumstances, but we do choose how we respond to them. And those of us on this call, there are many of us colleagues, you know, we help people who have very challenging circumstances in their communication and otherwise. They don't choose that. And for many of them, they might not be able to get past it. It might be with them for quite some time. The humanity of it is that we can choose how we respond to those circumstances. And being inspired by people on our website right now, on the blog page, you go to schneiderspeech.com and you go to the blog page on the top, there's an inspiration bank, which is filled with people who do things that had every excuse not to. Maybe that's something you want to wake up with and see how people with formidable challenges, real challenges, rose up against the odds, against the stories that they were told, and just decided, I'm going for it. And if all of us can make some small micro moves every day, we'll be already beating the odds. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be upended. It's okay to be frazzled, and it's okay to have chaos amok. And at the same time, if we create 5 minutes where we turn everything off and we read something good, if we take 1 moment every day to send someone a message, hey, how you doing? If we do those kinds of things, when we get through this, those are the things that are going to stand out, and that's how we're going to define who we really are. So I'll finish this portion with just a couple ideas that we're thinking about. I'd love to hear the interest. I'd love to hear the feedback, and I'd love to hear other questions. Number one, we are thinking as a team, many of us have families at home. Some of us are caring for parents and grandparents. Some of us have children of our own. I think there are a lot of parents that might benefit from having a membership group where once a week they could kind of check into a Zoom like this and just kind of clear the air and vent a little bit, and also get some really constructive ideas from a community of parents that are in the same boat. So one idea is having a parent group specific to getting through these days. Another idea that we had been cooking for a long time and is now possible and also maybe more necessary for people with communication impairments, specifically people who stutter, adults, teens, school-age children. We have been hearing from many, many people that this kind of conversation is very challenging. And the more the world depends on it, and the more that's happening in an online learning environment, students from 4th graders to 16-year-olds are talking about the online classroom being even tougher to make sure that their voice is heard. So having a group, support therapy group for school-age kids, having a support therapy group for teens, having a support therapy group for adults, young adults and adults alike, is something that we want to consider putting out there if there's an interest. And then the other thing that we want to do is, if anyone is not aware, we had been preparing an online course for people who stutter to help themselves. That course is on Thinkific. I'll send the link after the call, but that was something we've been working on for 3 years. It's a self-guided, self-help course, kind of choose your own adventure, but we tried to take everything we do in the office in person and put it into a format that people could go through that experience themselves. In these times, we'd like to consider putting together a cohort of people that could use the course, but also get a guided group going through the course. That course can be found on a website called www.schneiderspeech.thinkific.com. And we'll send all this out after the webinar. So if you want to check out the online course, and if you're interested in a cohort, a guided cohort doing that, let us know. Again, all the ideas I just mentioned also take into consideration that for some people, these are financially stressful times. And those are all opportunities for us, very honestly, to continue working and earning. But it's also an opportunity for people to get the help they still need at a highly reduced fee. And at the same time, there are people that might have wondered how they could get help in these times, or how they could find time to get help. Obviously, one-on-one therapy, 90% of our clients have shifted to online therapy and are continuing their one-on-one meetings. And as I said, many people surprisingly enjoy those meetings as much, if not more, than the face-to-face meetings. So those are just some ideas I wanted to put out there. You can email us by reaching out on the contact us page. So www.schneiderspeech.com/contact. And you can send us a message there, and you should get an answer within just a couple hours, at most 24 hours. But our team is working hard to continue to be there for our existing community of clients individually and potentially as groups of parents and kids and teens and adults. And we also want to be there for more people who may be looking for help or had been receiving critical care that they needed. And if we can be there to pick it up temporarily or support someone else in that process, we're here. And for our colleagues and friends, we're not looking to hold anything back. So if we can help you learn the tools that will enable you to do this kind of work and conduct your practice online, everything from setting up a Zoom account to setting up online, payment processing, we're here to help. And if you just need to reach out and say hi, we're here for that too. So very soon we'll have the website up with everything on it. That site will be schneiderspeech.com/COVID19, and we'll make that a clearinghouse of access for all these ideas and much, much more. And for my part, I just wanted to tell everybody we sincerely are rooting for each and every one of you, and we have a lot of stress in our own lives, to be very real. We all have a lot of stress in our lives. All of us are feeling this in a big, big way. None of us saw this coming. And at the same time, we have a lot of hope and a lot of faith, especially looking at the people in this call and knowing the people that we know, we are stronger together than any one of us is alone. And this is forcing us to kind of lean on that. And so let's lean in and let's do this and let's get through. It's going to be this much time. It's going to be really challenging, but let's think about the story we want to tell once we're on the other side of how we managed and how we coped. And whatever you need, we're here. So at this point, I'm going to turn off the recording. So if anyone wants to speak and not be on record, I'm turning that off right now.